a chess game in this beautiful notebook. And it's a chess game that my good friend Chess SMR has sent me. He thought that I should have a look at this chess game because it's a very beautiful, immortal chess game played over 100 years ago. So I'm gonna take a look at the game in a moment. But first I'm just gonna set up this beautiful chessboard. It's a ChessUP board, and I have the pieces right here. And if you like these pieces, we have a link with a promo code in the description, so you can get 10% discount on this beautiful interactive board. You can see once I put up the pieces on the white squares, then the color disappears like this. Oh, there was the final pawn. So what I'm gonna do next is go to this board. I'm gonna pick the ChessUP, and for this I'm gonna select 2 players. I'm gonna go without any assistance here and go play. And now I'm ready to play the game. So I'll just take a sip of my coffee first. And then let's look at what my good friend has sent me. Okay, so this is a chess game from 1912 between Edward Lasker with the white pieces and George Allen Thomas with the black pieces. And this game started with the move pawn to d4. And George Allen Thomas pushed his pawn from e7 to e6. By the way, I can see now that it's going to be quite a short game, and I can also see that it's going to end in checkmate, so I'm very excited to see that. Then Lasker, he put his knight on f3, so that it's protecting this pawn and just controlling the center. Then George Allen Thomas, he pushed this pawn from f7 to f5. It kind of looks like a Dutch opening, but I think it's called the Howard's defense. I'm not completely sure, so you can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. Here, Edward Lasker, he developed the other knight, also towards the middle of the board. And Black also developed one of his knights. Here we have yet another developing move. Bishop G5, pinning this knight on f6. And probably Black didn't like this very much to have his knight pinned, so he cancelled the pin by going here with the bishop. And now this knight can move without the queen being in danger. Here, White captured the knight on f6, and that looks, of course, possible. What could the idea be by capturing this knight? Once you take this knight, then Black is only controlling this square with a pawn. So what he did was he took the knight on f6. And then when Black recaptured, he pushed this pawn on e2 to e4. I think that's a very good move. I'm gonna make a little exclamation point here. Okay. Black can of course capture this pawn. And that's actually what happened in the game. Black took here. And white of course recaptured with the knight. Now, black could of course castle, but there are other options as well. Black has a whole queen side over here that should probably be developed at some point. And he decided to focus on this light squared bishop. This bishop can't really come out here because there are pawns in these squares, so he pushed b7 to b6 in order to get it out. And now Lasker, he put a knight in. He already has one knight in the middle of the game, in the middle of the board. And now he put his other knight there to join it. So he really understood that the knights, they prefer to be in the center of the game. And George Allen Thomas. I know that George Allen Thomas, he was quite a good chess player, even though he didn't. He ended up losing this game, but I know that he was also a very avid tennis player. I think he was even the best in England at one point. And here he castled, which is of course very often a good idea to do. And Lasker, he may have tried to do the same thing. He put out this bishop. He put it on d3 so that he's ready to castle. But also I like this bishop move because it's sort of aggressive. It's of course protecting this knight, but it's also kind of eyeing this square down here, 8-7. So it could potentially be a very dangerous diagonal for white. Okay, let's see. Black now played bishop b7. That of course makes a lot of sense, having cleared that square for the bishop. Oh, now comes an interesting move. So white wants to add to the attack here. White could of course just castle. That would be a legal move and probably also a good move. But he wanted to play it more aggressively. So he took his queen here on d1 and put it all the way to h5. And this comes with a very serious threat. Let me just check. Yeah, I think this is just not, this could be a huge problem for black if he didn't see what white had in mind now. So, can you see what white is threatening here? I'm just gonna take a sip of my coffee, and then I'm gonna show you the threat afterwards. Did you see what white was threatening? White is threatening to take this bishop on f6, take it with a check to the black king. And once black recaptures on f6, no matter if they take with the pawn, or the rook, or the queen, then white would be able to take an 8-7 with the queen, because it would then be protected by the bishop on d3, and that would actually be checkmate. So black decided to protect this by putting the queen on e7. And this gets ready to protect 8-7 in case white now captures on f6. The pawn can recapture, and then the queen is protecting the 8-7 square. So let's see how white continue from here. Oh, now I think I understand why HSMR Chess wanted to show me this. This is a beautiful move. This is probably what made the game so famous. White captured on 8-7 This is of course a check. We can also see that by the king now standing on a red square. The king cannot move here because there's a knight threatening. So black only has one option, which is of course also the most logical one, to take the queen. And what now? Now White has sacrificed a full queen. There should be a good reason for that. Let's see if we can find it. I of course have the solution in my notebook. But let's look at the options. So what we should notice now is that wherever we put this knight, it will be a discovered check from the bishop standing on d3. And there's a saying that a double check is double as good, or is twice as good as a normal chess check. So if we could move this knight so that it also gives a check to the king, then we know the king has to move. And why not pick up this bishop in the meantime? If we take here, which is what happened, then we also prevent this black king from going back to g8. So this is what we call a double check. The bishop is checking the king, and the knight is checking the king. And whenever you make a double check, then your opponent has to move their king. This is because it's not possible to capture two pieces at once, and it's also not possible to block two checks at once. So the king has two options now. It can either go back in the corner, which at first might look the safest, or it can go to h6. But I see now that if the king goes to h8, I think we can make that move. Then maybe you guys noticed that there is a fork in this position, what we call a family fork, that this knight would be able to go here and check the king, attack the rook, and attack the queen. But it's actually much more serious than that. If the knight goes here, it's checkmate, because the other knight is still controlling g8 and h7. So the king cannot go there, and he has to go forward. He has to go to h6. Okay. I could imagine that white would keep on checking in this position, but there are a few checks to pick from, so let's see which one Lasker played. Okay. So Lasker here, he has two knights that can both go and deliver a check on g4. And he picks this one. And I believe the reason he picks this knight is to give the black king as few options as possible. So if this knight goes to g4, the black king can both go to g5 and h5. But if this knight goes to g4, the black king cannot go here, and it must go here instead. Now there are two pawn moves that looks very compelling. One of them being h4 and the other one being f4. And I can see that Lasker chose to play h4, which once again gives black the fewest options. Maybe it's the same actually, but if you play f4, at least black would be able to capture that pawn. It still looks extremely dangerous, but I kinda like his move here by going h2 to h4, not allowing the king to capture anything, but only move closer towards white's camp. Okay, this king is really the bravest piece in the black army. Or maybe it's not so brave, it's just being forced to keep moving closer. checking. Black can, for example, take this knight. Or maybe black would be able to take this pawn down here. And if we check with the knight, moving the knight here to h5 looks tempting, but then it would no longer protect this knight. So we really have to still pull the king closer towards us, and we can do that by pushing this pawn to g3 with yet another check. And once again, the king only has one move. That seems to be a theme for this whole famous king walk, that whenever it's black's turn, he only has one move. So there's not a whole lot of options for black. Here the king went to f3, of course. And how can white keep checking? This knight could, of course, try to make some checks. It could go here and give a check. Or this bishop could give a check. It could give a check here, but then it would be captured from this bishop. So let me just think, because this check also looks extremely good, and it only gives black's king one square to go to. Oh, but maybe that's an issue, because if this knight goes here and the black king then goes to g2, then the rook is undefended, and if the rook moves, then the knight would be captured. It still looks scary for the black king, but white has sacrificed a whole lot to get this position, so he must play very precise. So bishop e2, forcing the king to go all the way to the second rank. And now we see the advantage of keeping the knight here on g4, that it's protecting h2. So white can now give another check here. This is a beautiful king walk. The king, once again, has only one option. Has to go to g1. Oh, can you see the checkmate? It's funny because there are two checkmates to pick from, and I wanted to play the other one than the one that Lasker picked. So, can you see how we can deliver one more check? It's actually quite beautiful, because the last move is a king move. If this king moves, if it moves just to the side, nothing much happens. But if it goes up here to d2, then it will be a discovered check, and this rook on a1 will checkmate the black king. And that is what he did. That is how the game ended. But do you see another way to checkmate? Yes, you can actually make queenside castle in this position. Wow. And if you weren't sure, this means that it's checkmate. This king went all the way from g8 all the way down to g1, where it's getting checkmated. And I know that I actually made the other one, Lasker, he moved the king, but I was too tempted to make the long castle instead. This was a beautiful game, and I really look forward to tell HSMR Chess that I've been going through this game, and see if I can find a game that is nearly as beautiful for him to go through. If you have any suggestions, you can comment those in the comment section. And thank you so much for watching.